There's several ways to get involved. Currently, we're changing the way that we join mailing lists. So you can still fill out the form to join the mailing list. We'll facilitate you, but soon this process will change to using a system called Wild Apricot for membership management to CARC. But if you'd like to volunteer for any of the groups that I just mentioned, if you to get involved in the People Network, email get started at CARC. You can suggest a call topic, although that's what this call is about, so maybe just do it here. Volunteer to lead a call, join a track steering committee or become a track coordinator. And if you want to get involved in a working group, etc., get involved at CARC is the place to go for that. All right, so I'd like to thank the steering committee members some who are here, some who are not. They're going to be the ones helping Justin and I facilitate this call. And the topic for today is what's cool in 2024. So we're generating topics for what's going to be researcher facing tracks topics in 2024. So just year in review for 2023, these are the topics that we did. We've gotten pretty good attendance at all of them. But we've gone through things ranging from how to get access to the national cybersecurity, or not cybersecurity, cyber infrastructure system. We've done sessions on cloud. We've done things about supporting researchers in the humanities, all sorts of stuff. We had a series in May about accessibility and skilling up in that area. So, and we've done some joint calls with the data facing track as well. So we could retread some of these areas. We could do things that are completely new. So what are the topics that piqued your interest at conferences in 23? This is one of the conversation prompts so that we can generate new topics. So people who went to PEARC, people who went to supercomputing, EDUCAUSE. Is there anything from these conferences that you think the CARC community could benefit from knowing within the context of the researcher-facing track? We're going to open it up for discussion. Feel free to unmute and speak. Or the chat's good too.
You have other prompts, or is it just conferences at this time?
Let's see, what else do we have? Let's just do the open discussion. So here's some suggestions that we've heard milling about. But yeah, let's just do open discussion. We'll take anything from conferences, anything otherwise. So lay them on us.
So I got hit by a request from a researcher shortly before the break, who a bioinformatics professor who teaches with a whole lot of software that typically our staff will have to work with the students to install. And he's asked about containerizing it or otherwise improving the package management. So I'd like to suggest package management for discipline-specific software.
Yeah.
How do people, handle these massive requests? Please install these 20 items of software for my class. And are there some best practices emerging? I sent him back a long Google list of sites that I had found that do containerize workloads for some things like that. But I thought it might be nice to have a discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Would you see the format as like people informally knowledge sharing, or would you like to see specific speakers on the topic?
Well, I suppose I could go back to that list that I sent him and see if anyone there is on this call. But for now, I think it's just a discussion.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put that on the list for sure.
I would love to see a solution on that one.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where people are all kind of running into similar problems and reinventing the wheel. So having a place to start would probably be a great boon to the community.
Yeah, especially given how slow Conda is these days, even with Mamba,
I'm seeing in the chat, Amy Nurnberger is suggesting something joint with the regulated research community of practice, because they've mentioned us on a recent call. Personally, I'd be interested in that. We've got a secure enclave project going on right now to facilitate NIST 800-871 data. So Amy, if you have any suggestions about specific people to reach out to, that would be great. But otherwise, we can do some research on that.
Yeah, I can get you names and stuff.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing a related topic to package management is workflow management. So things about best practices for systems like Nextflow and SyncMake. That's a hot topic. I know somebody in my group who knows something about those. Maybe I can conscript him about it.
Yeah, I think it would be a different topic, but yeah, I like it.
Yeah, don't want to lump those two together. I think we could have a full hour on both. And we've got one vote for workflow management, additional vote.
I think they probably would each fill up a session, my guess.
Yes, that's my thought too.
So I am adding the topics into the call doc. So guys, if you wanna up it up, just go to the call doc and add your +1 there.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Can somebody put the call doc link just to refresh people at the bottom?
Sure will.
Yeah.
And then also that survey. So folks, while we're on this call, that survey will also help drive some of our topic ideas, and we can look at that before the meeting's over and see if there's some interesting ideas there too.
Maybe I'll jump in on these few topics we've had so far, just from the past memory. We did have a PE presentation a couple summers ago. I remember that because one of our guys was talking about a PE equals protected environment, right? But the things have changed quite a bit since then. There is the CMMC initiative now, which is kind of fairly stirring things up quite a bit. So yeah, I think this would be a good topic to refresh. And the same thing with the workflows. We did have a workflow talk a while back, but things probably evolved since then, or at least well, we might have some more people using more of the different tools that are out there. I'm just a little worried with the workflows is that there is about a dozen of them out there, the workflow managers, and everybody's got their favorite. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how can we approach that. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, I think it would be kind of useful to help us to steer the discussion.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So I have a question because I've been unable to puzzle out the answer. In the CARC groups, is there a space where the computer science of HPC is pursued? You know, it's somewhere between systems facing and research facing, right?
I don't think so. Not that I know of explicitly. Others can chime in if they know more than I do.
So I'll tell you why I bring it up. In the past few months, I've been sucked into the world of single board computers. And briefly, you can approach these things at orders of magnitude less cost than HPC equipment. I mean, you could build a quite decent little multi-node single board cluster that can run Slurm and everything for a few $100. And the single nodes themselves is be as little as a few tens of dollars. And what I've done is I've approached, after I've played with these for a while, in 3 or 4 different variants, I've first turned them into some monitoring projects for our HPC center, but I've turned to the computer science department and suggested that we should just issue a small cluster or have a little, lab where you can check out small clusters for all computer science students who are interested in learning parallel programming. And it doesn't really fit in the CARC topics because we're not in that business, right? We're in the business of, providing for researcher needs and figuring out how to optimize our approaches to that. But here's an area where, I can get, for as little as a couple $100, I could hand a computer science student a cluster and say, I want you to work on the Slurm job data reporting, or metrics development and stuff like that. So I'm not going to propose it here, but I'm probably going to propose it in systems facing, and I may ask for a joint session.
Yeah, I like that.
Uh,
Is
to-
the sorry, go ahead.
I'm open to any feedback on that.
No, Alan, I think that's going to systems with that would be a good way. That could be a joint call. And then also, you know, those researchers are using cyber infrastructure at our university, so it will impact the support across. So that would be a good topic. Also, there's Jacqueline has a comment in there about how has user-facing support changed in the last 10 years? Are there trends that we anticipate will be shifting into the future? So that's Jacqueline, you're welcome to turn on the mic and elaborate. That's a good idea.
Well, what I've noticed is like 10 years ago when I was supporting people, they were still coding in C++ and Fortran, and we get very little of that nowadays. It's mostly they have data, they're uploading pre-written algorithms and just running that. So what is the best way for us to support these people? Now, it seems like our support is more where to store the data, how to access the data, as opposed to how to parallelize code. I'm just wondering if other people are experiencing that sort of trend in user support.
May I speak on this one?
Yeah, definitely.
So actually, Kyle from TCU, I think this is my first researcher CARC that I've attended. My understanding in the grant space that the NSF is awarding more grants for the human collaboration element instead of, like a lot of the historical grants are hardware based. You give a hardware resource over to the public or another university for collaboration. They're turning it to open your human resources up for human collaboration in the exact space that you're asking about, because not every institution they're under the knowledge that not every institution can handle and provide the coding skill that some of these faculty and researchers need. And what they're doing is saying, hey, I have a grant and I'll hire this software research engineer and I'll give him 40% of the time to the public. So that's what I've heard, and it would be a good idea to pull those resources of who's opening up those human resources to the research community. So I'm piggybacking that question to, it's out there. We need to collaborate and collect all of those information together so that we can use them properly. And then Alan, I also wanted to ask, what question are you hoping to answer with that? Because I just put in a Raspberry Pi cluster for my computer science department so that the graduate students can start working on ARM, because ARM CPUs are either high in servers or simple Raspberry Pis. So just kind of curious what you're hoping to answer with your question to the community.
Yeah, so it isn't a question. I'm actually hoping to do demos, and I've built Raspberry Pis. I've built a RISC-V cluster. I have some little x86 Celeron single boards, $69 for the quad-core x86 processor that are on their way. These things are just developing, driven by the hobby market. And the problem that I see is that there's not right now an overlap between the tools that we use in HPC. So, for example, if I wanted to teach someone how to run a scheduler or how to do parallel programming with a small cluster under their control, these things are tempting for that. So I have stuck to the small cost end of it because that's attractive. But what has made the big difference for me is that because of the work that you referred to in especially ARM, the upstream, the highest end processors out there from Amazon and NVIDIA and so forth are ARM processors. So what's happened is that I can now install not a hobbyist, Raspbian. I can actually install Fedora or even Rocky Linux directly on my little Raspberry Pi cluster. And I had a demo at Supercomputing where I was showing this off. Because of the work on the upstream heavier end processors. And I'm expecting something similar like to that to happen in RISC-V. But for now, my motivation is focused on getting these things in the hands of the computer science students who work with us on our, we have a program for instrumentation of our cluster that's been going for several years, where we query the baseboard management controllers and sled scheduler, and we assemble quite sophisticated graphs of what's going on in the cluster. And a lot of their development can be done on these little SBC clusters.
Yeah, I think and just to rip off of that topic, one of the things that a use case we've been encountering a lot is alternatives to our HPC cluster, because there are things that our cluster cannot do, primarily deal with data has some sort of secure element. Like we don't have it set up to be like a HIPAA cluster or anything. So we've been having to come up with like other ways to support compute and data storage that aren't covered by our standard systems.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I keep coming up, this idea keeps coming into my head and I keep rejecting it. We've all got those users that want to run, single threaded Mr. Bayes for months, right? And we try to accommodate them somehow by making them purchase resources or finding some old piece of the cluster that we don't mind running for a long time. And I have to admit, it keeps coming up with me. I could just hand them one of these things and say, plug this into your wall and let me know when your calculation is done. We could even check them out. We could maintain them. I've even toyed with building something I've sort of tentatively labeled a smart socket, that these things are small enough that you can just plug them on top of the Ethernet outlet in an office. And we could get the telecom folks to set the routing so that it's invisible to everybody else. We could actually maintain them as part of a cluster and run. And then when you get carried away with that, you got to start thinking, oh man, I could put HT Condor on them. And I could, so you end up back with the cycle scavenging that we used to do a couple decades ago. And some people still do. So yeah, it's the one warning I will issue to people is if you get started looking into single board clusters, it's a whirlpool that will suck you right in.
I love it. I think I saw a hand up from Jim earlier. Jim, do you still want to contribute an idea?
Yeah, I was going to follow up to a comment that Alan made and also Justin about a joint topic between the systems. So I'm in the systems facing steering committee. And so a joint topic that we were talking about was, it came up with one of our steering committee members, and it was, how do we support like AI, or in particular large language models, for our researchers that want to do it? And it came out of an incident where basically he had to shut down the cluster because so many people were trying to train their large language model, I think for a class at the time. So so he's working on some ideas at Harvard of how to, this is Jason Wells, on how to support AI in particular, that the kind of, everybody wants to do it now and they want to train in it. And so how can we better support that from the system side? But we could certainly use some use cases from the research side, telling us where, a favorable alliance has been struck between the systems people and the researchers to get it done. So that's what I wanted to follow up to Alan's comment about a joint session, is that's sort of what we're thinking about right now, in terms of we haven't approached you yet about it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Like I kind of can't believe that researcher facing hasn't had a session on AI already. So
Well, so I'm on a couple of review committees, and when this topic comes up, we end up converging on the point that apart from the kind of training that that people undertake just to learn how this is done, HBC in academia largely lacks the kind of access to extremely large data sets that drive the largest infrastructures. So we will never be in the business of training LLMs like industry does. And nor should we, I think, arguably, says a lot of that stuff is based on what I call plagiarism as a service. But you can ask another kind of question that I think you're right on track on, which is, where do scientists, engineers, so forth, have access to unique data sets that would serve as input to large language models or other kinds of training-based AI, as opposed to inference? We see a lot of inference usage, but we don't see a lot of training usage, which is the computational and data-heavy part of it. So the inference stuff workloads are quite trivial, and we've been able to accommodate them with our normal resources. But if you ask yourself, okay, is there a science group out there with access to like all of the wave data all over the world, on shores, or other really large data sets that have not been attacked yet because they've never been input into one of these models? I don't know. That's the sort of direction I get led to. I think your idea is sound, but I think we have to kind of separate the training that is productive scientifically from people just learning how the software works.
That's fair.
To Tobin, to tie this back maybe to the support side of things at my institution, we've been focusing more, the central IT unit has been focusing on kind of a federated model for IT. In the past, all these academic units have been running their own localized IT support, and that has structurally been around academic and administrative needs. And then the researchers kind of have fended for themselves or do get involved if they know somebody. So now that we're having a more structured conversations about how to support IT at the local level now, and then we're trying to build out a cyber infrastructure support unit, we're starting to connect the dots with those local workstation people and their relationships that they have with the local IT people, and starting to get more visibility. And one of the things they need, is asset inventories of where instruments are at and where different things are. Anyway, it's sparking this idea of how we support the broader mission on campus and bring research into that a little more broadly, but it's also impacting those handoffs. And then, when we do get a researcher that's asking about buying something from IBM that has natural language processing, that we can quickly point them to the people that have already bought something or are building collaborations. So that support model is changing a lot at Michigan State.
I think things are moving in varying directions, all the different places. All right, I'm seeing Jan has a couple of messages in the chat about Amazon hosting really large data sets at their open data. AWS said Amazon /open data. And they also they accept data, like really large data sets from researchers. I don't know what the application process is for that. Has anyone tried to bring a researcher through this process or know anything about it? Jan, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah, I heard the comment about where to get large data sets to that are not subject to copyright and so forth, and worrying about those sort of challenges. AWS hosts through our open data program large data sets from all sorts of disciplines. I'm not associated with the program, but I can put you in touch with those folks to learn more about it. One of the goals of the program is to make available these large data sets, because we know that they're not only huge and take up space, but that they are rich. And because of that, lots of researchers can extract really interesting science from them. So as our sort of gift to the community, this is one of the things that we do. There is an application process, and not every large data set is accepted. There are criteria. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know that 2 of the criteria are that it is a data set that is currently used and of interest to a number of researchers. So it's not just one researcher's data, but it's something that is already quite popular or has an engaged researcher community around it. And secondly, that engaged researcher community is actively supporting any software or documentation associated with that data. So if anyone is interested in learning more, I'm happy to put you in touch with that team.
Great, thank you. Do you, I know you said you don't know about all of the criteria, but do you have a sense of like how big is big?
I don't. I can find out.
Awesome.
But I'm sure it goes up to petabytes in many cases.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, we've also got a plug in the chat for another site that hosts big data sets called Hugging Face.
So I got, let's go over a few other topics that we have in the call doc, that some are directly in the call doc, some are compiled from the chat. One that, or there are 2 that kind of caught my eye. One of them is user training and practices. I don't think we've covered that in a while. And at least in my experience, things changed a little bit, especially with our class support for us recently. I'm mainly attributing it to open on demand. We have this semester, we have many more professors asking us to provide computer resources for their classes that we had in the past that I remember. So I think that would be something of interest, both from, I would kind of look at it in 2 directions. One, user training for your local HPC center versus, and then the other sort of potential direction would be supporting classwork across your whole institution. So anybody has any thoughts on that?
I like the supporting classes option, because it may, if we turn over that stone, it may show up some unexplored options. Of course, open on demand has a hugely positive effect here, but we have seen recently, in the last couple of years, a huge increase in the rate at which professors are signing up their entire class for the cluster. So the beginning of each semester, we typically will make hundreds of new accounts. And we have actually built a new system to provision that and deprovision at the end of this semester.
I would almost look into this, maybe do a series of lightning talks from different institutions that kind of show how they do it. Because I think we could all learn from each other on the best practices that everybody does and potentially improve our own process. So maybe Ellen, I'll take you on that. And if anybody has or would like to share their practices, then I guess let us know and we can set something up in the future. Yeah, Jacqueline, you're talking, you're mentioning here how to give effective workshops to increase attendance. That's kind of an everlasting problem, I guess, at least in my experience. So that could be another, I would probably even make it as a separate topic. I'm not sure how these things overlap with the class support. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the eternal struggle, and I feel like it's gotten more complicated since COVID. Like things shifted one way very strongly, and now they're shifting back. And now I think like there's a lot of people who don't want in person anymore, but it's really hard to do interactive stuff over Zoom. So I'd be interested in hearing people's experience with that.
Yeah, good. So that sounds like a good future topic. And the other one was Pradeep has set support for structural biology EM protein data banks. I added cryo-EM or perhaps more or generally how to support software for discipline-specific areas. I can tell from our local experience here that the cryo-EM has really sort of exploded over the last 3 or 4 years, and we are supporting multiple software packages that deal with the cryo-EM data. We have some pipelines that bring the data from the instruments to our storage, and then the researchers do whatever data wrangling they do with that on our systems. We have even some separate servers that install programs that are not really all that well suited to running in a cluster. So I think this would be an interesting kind of a case study for this very specific discipline or discipline infrastructure needs. So I think it would be a useful topic. The question here is if anybody would be in this community would be sort of up to speed to discuss this, or if we should fish around for some researcher in the community that could give us sort of the overview of that. Any thoughts on that?
I love having researchers in the researcher facing track.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was specifically a biology researcher that that drove me to the previous suggestion. I'm wondering if that's actually an opportunity, just to invite the people making these requests in and say, would you please tell us what you need?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it in two directions. One is what they need, and two is how do we satisfy that need? So I guess we could even make it as a two topic kind of, no, not two topic, but no, have one half of the call related to the researcher, and the second is how we actually make it happen.
Yeah, we're looking at just building containers for them. But that exposes a whole raft of other things. As you know, package management itself is complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the cryo-EM that we support over here, we have a bunch of software that is more or less just running fine on a cluster, like Reliant, things like that. Then we have the specific, and then there are the programs that are really specific that don't really fit onto the cluster, are more kind of server related. Like they have usually kind of some kind of a web interface, things like that. So there is one called CryoSpark. And then there is also another one called AppIon Protomo, which we actually have containerized. But the container is running on this dedicated server that is also running the CryoSpark. Just because again it didn't really fit onto the cluster due to it has a web server, it has a database, and so it's kind of somewhat orchestrated, container that is running multiple of these services that talk to each other. So that's pretty much all I know. I support the Reliant, I build that, but I don't really work that much with the servers that our sysadmins are dealing with that. So it's a pretty complex topic, at least in my mind, from the experience that we have here. No, I didn't even realize there was a systems facing call on CRY-EM. I must have missed that one.
It was a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
I can look it up and put the link in the chat, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone have examples of interesting use cases like that that might make a good call? That's a combo of a researcher talking about the research and a RCD professional talking about the solutions. Well, if something comes to you later, don't be afraid to contact us with ideas. Right, there's a bit of a side conversation in the chat about are people quote unquote allowed to support classroom use cases? Because I know this is probably the larger topic is probably more strategy and policy facing, but like depending on where your funding comes from, you might have a really specific charge, and like how do you split hairs on the things where a particular technology could be useful for both, but you're not really funded to serve one or the other audience? Go ahead, Methley.
My topic isn't, it's not related to this, Tobin,
That's
so I'll
fine.
wait. Yeah. Okay, so I was wondering if we have covered ever, I'm sure we have ever, but the relationship between the different components within an organization. So what is a successful relationship between a department and the library and IT and the computer science, the HPC folks? Like what does a successful ecosystem look like? Or what do some successful ecosystems look like? Because I know those can be fairly tense sometimes. But at the end of the day, if the research, the support providers don't figure that out, it becomes a very stressful and long, tiresome experience for the researcher to be bounced from place to place. So I was wondering if anyone has experience with that, or if that's something we could discuss. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there have been similar talks in the strategy and policy facing track and maybe EDUCAUSE RCD groups, but those are more like established programs that have kind of come top down. But I think there's a lot of work that we could do in this area, like with people talking about how they've done it more grassroots, like people who are on the ground doing the work, communicating with each other and coordinating. Does anyone else have thoughts on that? Right.
So while people
Well,
are thinking, I had another sort of thoughts about the rehashing few of the topics we've done years back. And it does kind of, we have come up with a few that would kind of fit to this, like LNC package management, that we have talked about it a long time ago, but things have changed quite a bit since then. Right, the AI, machine learning, and the support of that. The other another topic that I thought might be of interest is the gateways overall, kind of like ease of access to HPC resources, how the ecosystem has changed since we last talked about open on demand maybe 2.5 years ago. Yeah, things of that sort.
yeah, I like that. Somewhat related, I know last year we did some presentations on access, but are there any parts of the national computing ecosystem that people are interested in hearing about? Like somebody mentioned HG Condor earlier, or stuff like Jetstream. So put it in the chat if you have any additional ideas or are interested in those. All right. We got at least one vote. All right, I think the plan was to start winding this down at 12:50, but it seems like maybe the conversation is slowing, so I'm gonna put some pressure on. So if you've got something burning in your gut right now that you want to suggest, please feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
Yeah, so I just I echo what Tobin said. We have a bunch of notes in the chat with the different topics. Please just take some time to go over them and add pluses to your interests. That will help us to sort of prioritize the topics.
Yes, definitely. And just as a note, well, first off, I want to thank everyone for coming. This was a great conversation. I think we've got a lot of ideas to fill out the next year. But we don't currently have a topic for February. So if you have something kind of ready to go and you want to volunteer, please let us know.